Namaste. Welcome you all to the episode 3 of Understanding the Sanatana Dharma series, brought to you by Aham Brahmasmi Foundation, a unit of Dakshinamnaya Sri Sharada Peetham. In the previous discussion, we understood the value of Sanatana Dharma, its authenticity, and the Vedas. In today's discussion, let's explore various scriptures in Hinduism apart from the Vedas. We shall then delve into the significance of Ramayana and Mahabharata and understand what we can learn from them. Today we have with us Mahodaya Sri Arjun Bharadwaj, who is an esteemed scholar, researcher, and author with deep interest in classical arts, literature, and philosophy. He's authored around 15 books on various aspects of Sanatana Dharma, including the Ramayana and Mahabharata. We welcome you, Mahodaya.
Namaste. Thanks a lot. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
So, going into our first question, there are various scriptures in Hinduism apart from Vedas, and we understand the broad classification of Shruti and Smriti in general. So, could you please explain to us what is Shruti and what is Smriti?
Absolutely. That's one of the most important things to understand. Like the very word Shruti reveals, it means something which has come down from the Maukika Parampara or the oral tradition, something which has been heard. The Shrutis specifically refer to the Vedas, the four Vedas, the Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, and the Atharva Veda. They're called Shrutis because they were the revelations which the sages, the rishis, had upon deep meditation and deep contemplation. It was not something which they wrote of their own accord. It was a divine revelation. It is what they heard from the divinities. So that is what is believed in the Sanatana tradition. And similarly, after they heard it, after they realized it, they passed it on in the oral tradition, and therefore it gets the name Shruti. And the very word Veda comes from the Vidagnane Dhatu. So the Vedas are a compendium of the material and the spiritual knowledge, and the transcendence from the material to the spiritual, from the Adibhuta to the Adhyatma. Now, the Vedas, it might be very difficult to access them for the common people. Because the language is quite complex and the philosophy which is embedded in the Vedas is very deep. So a common man may find it very difficult to access it unless he goes through a very rigorous process of learning, which will require a lifetime or sometimes many lifetimes together you'll have to dedicate to the Vedic learning itself. So therefore, to simplify the Vedic knowledge without losing on its profundity, but simply simplifying it and giving it to the masses, that is what the Smrutis do. Like the very word Smruti reveals, it is related with memory. So even the word Smruti is trying to indicate that they are it is the knowledge tradition from times immemorial, which has come down in the collective memory of the people belonging to Bharatavarsha, this Punya Bhumi Bharata. So the Smrutis themselves are also not necessarily again authored by one single person. It is the entire community which has contributed towards making of them. The Smrutis include what are called the Vedangas. There are 6 limbs of the Vedas which help in understanding the Veda better. They are, for instance, Shiksha, Vyakarana, Chandas, etc. See, Shiksha, for instance, is the science of pronunciation. If you have to understand the Vedas, you'll have to be first able to pronounce it properly. Any language for that matter. If you want to learn English or German or Greek or even the Samskrita Bhasha, the Devavani, pronunciation is something very important. That is how we picked up languages as even small children, whether it is our own mother tongue, Kannada, etc. And then we'll have to know the Vyakarana, the relationship between different words in a sentence, etc. So that is what Vyakarana gives us. To understand the Vedas or any other texts, we'll have to be thorough with the Vyakarana. We'll have to have an understanding of Nirukta. Nirukta refers to the etymology of different words, specific words. Because in addition to construction of a sentence, the interrelationship between the words in the sentence and the meaning of those specific words in that specific context, we'll have to know. That is what the Nirukta helps us to do. And one of the beauties of the Sanskrit language is that it can lend itself very nicely to metrical patterns. So Chandas is one of the other Vedangas, which loosely tells us, putting it in simple terms, the metrical pattern which is inbuilt in the Vedic scriptures, in the four Vedas. Then there is something called Kalpa and Jyotisha. Kalpa refers to the ritualistic aspects, while the first four are related to how to pronounce it, how to understand it, etc. The Kalpa Sutras, they tell us about how it can be put into practice. And Jyotisha, the word Jyotisha relates to Jyoti. Jyoti means light. So Jyotisha is a science which studies the light emitting objects in the sky. The light emitting objects are the sun and the moon, of course, and the stars. Even today, we get to know the time by looking at the sun, the moon, and the stars, etc. So Jyotisha is that branch or limb of the Vedas which help us understand when the specific rituals have to be performed. So these are the Vedangas which help us understand the Vedas better. So this is one aspect of Smruti. Then the other aspect of Smruti are the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. They are called the Arsha Kavyas. Arsha Kavyas because they are written out of realization by the poets, by Valmiki and Vyasa. Sage Valmiki wrote the Ramayana and Sage Vyasa wrote the Mahabharata. In fact, both of them are considered Panchama Vedas in the Indian tradition. Now, when I say the Panchama Veda, one must not get confused and think that, oh, there's a competition between Ramayana and Mahabharata to occupy the Panchama Veda place. That's not the idea. When we say the Ramayana is the Panchama Veda, the Mahabharata is the Panchama Veda, the Natya Veda is the Panchama Veda, Ayurveda is the Panchama Veda, etc., it is not that we Indians are confused about what the Panchama Veda is. We are giving it a status equal to the other four Vedas. It is as important as the other four Vedas. This is what it is said. See, for example, there are these seven wonders of the world. If you see some other very amazing instance, you'll say, oh, that's the eighth wonder. So something like that. So these are all equally important as the Vedas. Now, for instance, with regards to the Ramayana, there's a very famous shloka, Veda Vedye Pare Pumsi Jate Dasharathatmaje Veda Prachetasa Sakshad Ramayana Atmana. So what is it trying to say? That Parama Purusha, that Paramatma, that Satchidananda Tattva, which could be understood only through the Vedas, for our convenience, he took the form of Sri Rama and he was born as the son of Dasharatha. So to tell us about the life of this person, the values that he embedded, etc., that Satchidananda Paramatma, Nirguna Paramatma, he came down in Saguna form. Something which is abstract has been concretized in the form of Rama. So to tell us the qualities of Rama, Prachetaso Munihi, so that is a reference to Valmiki, he wrote the Panchama Veda called the Ramayana. Veda Vedye Pare Pumsi Jate Dasharathatmaje Veda Prachetasa Sakshad Ramayana Atmana. Similarly, about the Mahabharata also, the same idea is said. It is the Panchama Veda. In fact, the names of these authors are also very symbolic. Vyasa, for instance, the very word Vyasa means the diameter of the circle. The diameter is the longest chord of the circle and it encompasses the entire circumference of the circle. It can move about and cover the entire circumference. Similarly, Vyasa Maharshi, he has encompassed all the different aspects of Sanatana Dharma. So that is the kind of holistic contribution that Vyasa has given. And that is one of his main contributions is the Mahabharata. In addition to that, it is believed that he is the author of the Ashtadasha Mahapuranas. There are 18 Mahapuranas and he is thought to be the author. And it is also said that the Puranas reflect the heart of the Vedas in the best possible manner. It is also believed in the Indian tradition that he has authored something called the Brahma Sutras, which constitute the Prasthanatraya. It is a foundational text of the philosophical tradition of India. So Brahma Sutras, to put it in simple terms, they are aphorisms or formulae which help us understand the Parabrahma Tattva, the divine, the sublime aspects. Now, I'll just conclude my answer to this question with another shloka. Nishrenyo Brahmalokasya Vagdevyah Karnakundale Dharmadruma Mahamule Valmiki Vyasayoh Kruti. This is a shloka which is said by a poet from Karnataka called Kaviraja in his Raghava Pandaviyam. It's a kavya. So it's a combination of the two epics in a way. So he's saying, Nishrenyo Brahmalokasya. This Mahabharata and Ramayana are staircases to the Brahmaloka. They, through the medium of entertainment, they are trying to educate us about the material aspects of life and the spiritual aspects of life. Nishrenyo Brahmalokasya Vakdevyah Karnakundale. Vagdevi is Devi Saraswati. She is the one who has given us the power of speech, the power of knowledge, etc. And what did Valmiki and Vyasa do? They sculpted the language so beautifully that the Ramayana and Mahabharata are like the two earrings of Vagdevi. See, this is the best gift we can give. She is the one who has given us speech, and for her Shravanendriya, through her ear, she hears, and these two become the ear ornaments. And then Dharma Druma Mahamule. They constitute the strong roots of the Dharmic tree, of the Sanatana Dharma tree. The Ramayana and the Mahabharata constitute the strong roots. Valmiki, Vyasa Yoh Kruti. These are the two works of Valmiki and Vyasa. So, in summary, the Smruti texts include the Vedangas, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and the various Puranas. There are 18 Mahapuranas of huge size and deep depth. And there are some Puranas called Upa Puranas, which are smaller in size, but again very profound in content. And there are things called Upa Puranas, Upa Puranas. So there are numerous texts on the Puranas. So all of these constitute the Smruti literature. They are meant to lead us towards the Shruti literature. And one more aspect to remember is that the Shrutis are considered Apaurusheya Shruti, that is the Vedas. Apaurusheya as in, it is not out of human effort that it is written, but out of divine revelation. That is one thing. Secondly, it also means that the Vedas are not the contribution or the composition of one human being. Like Shakespeare wrote his plays Hamlet or whatever, Kalidasa wrote Raghuvamsha, etc. It's not like that, but it's the entire community which has contributed. And it's the divine which has revealed this idea. So, Apaurusheya are the Smrutis, Shrutis. The Smrutis also have a similar quality. They are the recollections of the civilization from its own memory, from its own cultural memory.
Such an in-depth description of both Shruti and Smriti, and I think it's very important for people in modern times to understand this and also study this. So, moving on to my next question, you mentioned earlier that Ramayana and Mahabharata were part of Smritis, and also the Puranas were also part of Smritis. Right. So, which one is older? Was Ramayana and Mahabharata older than Puranas, or is it vice versa?
Very good question. This is usually asked by many people. See, the traditional belief in India is that Ramayana is the oldest of these works. That is why it is called the Adi Kavya and Valmiki is called the Adi Kavi. And following this, the Mahabharata was composed by Veda Vyasa, and he composed the Ashtadasha Puranas, also the 18 Puranas. That is what is believed. We have evidence for this internally within the works. See, for instance, the Ramayana, if you go through the entire Valmiki Ramayana, there is no reference to the Mahabharata within the Ramayana. However, in the Mahabharata, there is something called the Ramopakyana, which is a condensed narrative of the Ramayana itself. So, therefore, Mahabharata, in a sense, has the Ramayana within its own self. It was narrated by Markandeya Maharshi to Yudhishthira. It occurs in the Aranya Parva or the Vanaparva of the Mahabharata. So, therefore, it's kind of evident from the Mahabharata itself that the Ramayana story was popular during the composition of the Mahabharata. So, that is why it has been included as a part of the Mahabharata, and it comes as a sign of consolation for Yudhishthira. So, Yudhishthira is always in pain. Why am I suffering so much? And why is all this happening? Etc. So, that is why the sages come and tell him one story after the other. So, there he gets to hear that Rama and Sita also, for no mistake of theirs, they underwent suffering. So, Ramopakyana comes in the Mahabharata itself. And now, with regards to the Puranas, many of them have the story of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata in a nutshell within themselves. If not the entire Ramayana or the Mahabharata, at least some incidents from the Ramayana and the Mahabharata are quoted in the Puranas. So, looking at this, it seems like the Ramayana is the oldest, the Mahabharata came next, and the Puranas followed it.
So we all know that Vyasa Maharshi wrote Mahabharata.
Right,
And also you mentioned that he authored the 18 Puranas.
right.
So is he the only person who has written this huge text and the Puranas, or are there any other contributors as well to this?
Very good. Yeah. Today, looking back, it might find we might find it very fascinating that one human being was able to do so much, accomplish so much in his life. In fact, like you would know, the original name of Vyasa is Krishna Dvaipayana. He was born in a Dvipa to Maharshi Parashara and Satyavati. So he came to be called Dvaipayana. Krishna because Karshanat Krishna Ityahu. The very word Krishna comes from Akarshana or Karshana, the power of attraction and assimilation. That is what the word Krishna reveals. In fact, Bhagwan Sri Krishna in the Mahabharata, he also has similar qualities. So, in the name of Krishna Dvaipayana, the word Krishna is suggestive of the fact that Vyasa Maharshi had the ability of accumulating everything from the world and digesting within himself and putting it out in a way which is relatable to the people. Now he has written this Eka Laksha Shlokatmaka, 1 laksha shlokas Mahabharata, and 18 Mahapuranas. See, for example, if you go to the Skanda Purana, it has got almost 80,000 shlokas. And the Matsya Purana is huge. The Agni Purana is very huge. Is it humanly possible for one person to do so much? Obviously, the question arises. And he is supposed to have authored the Brahma Sutras. And he is also one who reorganized the Vedas. That is why he got the name Veda Vyasa in the first place. Is it humanly possible for one person to do all this? Firstly, it is humanly possible. We need not underestimate anyone. We have seen such stalwarts living around us who have mastered 18 languages and have written multiple works in all these languages. So, firstly, it is humanly possible. But, however, with regards to this particular question, we hear that there was something called the Purana Samhita, authored by Vyasa's father, Parashara Maharshi. So, the Purana Samhita, traditionally, it looks like all the Puranas in a nutshell was contained in the Purana Samhita. It's like the seed of the rest of the Puranas. Now, Vyasa would have given guidance to multiple generations of his students about how to take this knowledge forward. So, it is the Vyasa Drishti, it is the vision of Vyasa, which was carried forth by many of his generations together of students. So, these generations of students probably authored the individual Puranas. But, however, the seed thought is from Vyasa and his father. So, usually in the Indian tradition, we do not boast about our own contribution towards anything. We always want to attribute it to something higher over and above us. In fact, Bhagavan Sri Krishna also says in the Bhagavad Gita, Evam parampara praptam. He's saying the Bhagavad Gita or whatever that I'm speaking now here, Arjuna, this is not something of my creation. It is something which has come down from the parampara. That is what the Puranas are also trying to indicate. Whoever may be the human author of the Puranas, but they are all attributing it to Vyasa Maharshi because the seed thought. See, it's the Sanatana Dharma is usually compared to the big banyan tree. So, see, the big banyan tree, is it one tree or multiple trees? It is one tree and multiple trees at the same time. There is one Mula Vriksha, and from that main trunk of the tree, there are many branches which sprout out of so many different directions. And from there are roots which come down to the earth. And from there, other shoots are born and they again spread out in the form of branches. It is multiple trees and one tree at the same time, right? All of them organically integrated and they have the same common root, which is the Mula Vriksha. So, in that way, the Puranas can be thought of as rooted in the Vyasa Manodharma, but then the offshoots are probably contributed, helped by his students, students of students, etc. Yeah, but the Vyasa Drishti, the vision of Vyasa is what is very important. That has been the driving force for, of course, the Mahabharata. He has himself authored the entire Mahabharata, and he has given the vision for the rest of the Puranas.
So even the Upapuranas and Upopapuranas are also authored by Vyasa Maharshi.
Yeah, that is what it is claimed. All the Puranas claim to have been authored by Vyasa Maharshi. But then, like I said, the human author may be different, but the vision is Vyasa's.
Beautiful.
See, for instance, if I have to connect it with the dance and drama tradition, any artist was called Bharata or Bharata, right? So again, relating it to the ancient tradition which started with Bharata. Every other text, they say that we have derived from that tradition something similar. Yes.
That's a wonderful description of the Vyasa Maharshi and how it is humanly possible for one person to contribute so much into the literature. So going on to the next question, we know that Vyasa comes as a character in Mahabharata, and likewise Valmiki also comes as a character in Ramayana. So did they both exist during that period?
Absolutely. That is what the texts tell us. Vyasa comes at several instances in the Mahabharata. Valmiki comes in the beginning and towards the end of the Ramayana. In the middle also there is a passing mention of Valmiki's ashrama. But he comes lesser number of times in the Ramayana compared to Vyasa coming in the Mahabharata. See, they were participative in the epics. This is another very unique feature only of Indian epics, where the poet himself becomes a character. See, this is again a good aesthetic challenge for the poet himself, right? He is becoming a character and participating in the story, but still he has to write it in a dispassionate manner. See, usually what happens is when we are involved in a narrative, we try to give only our own biased perspective. But here, what Vyasa and Valmiki have done is that they have risen above one person's perspective. They have given that universal global perspective, the entire situation and the entire character. See, yes, so they were, of course, contemporary to the times of the epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Yeah.
So we know that Vyasa Maharshi is considered immortal. He's a Chiranjeevi. How do we understand this during this modern time when we tend to look at everything in a rational way?
Of course, there's a very good answer to that. Our tradition always speaks in the form of metaphors. We're not trying to say that this person called Vyasa exists even today in flesh and blood. We're not trying to say that at all. The principle of Vyasa, the philosophy of Vyasa, the foundations that he has laid to the Sanatana Dharma, that is immortal. That is what is suggested by this. If you remove the Mahabharata, if you remove the Bhagavad Gita, if you remove Bhagavan Sri Krishna, Sanatana Dharma wouldn't have remained like this. So therefore, the tattva of Vyasa is immortal. So that's the idea suggested there. We're not trying to say that Vyasa is biologically existing today. He is spiritually existing today. See, we need not see everything from the perspective of the material world and understand immortality or Chiranjivitva as something which is related only to the death or the non-death of the body only. In spirit, people can exist. In spirit, their contribution to the intellect and the emotion can be immortal. So that is what is suggested by the statement.
Beautiful. So important to understand that the spirit and the tattva is what everyone needs to give importance to and understand.
Sure, yes.
Previously, from what you mentioned, Ramayana is the oldest text and then comes Mahabharata. So how do we understand this? Which one is older? When we consider different narratives, events and locations and type of governance and different things, we see or it looks like Mahabharata is the older one. So how do we understand this? Which is the older one? And also another question to this is some Western scholars also argue that we have got the sequence wrong from our tradition. Mm-hmm. So how do we understand this and what's your opinion about this?
Yeah, very important to know this as well. See, many of these arguments about the antiquity of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata is also because of the language structure. The language of the Ramayana looks much more refined and poetic, whereas the language of the Mahabharata is more rustic. And there are prose passages in the original text of the Mahabharata, the prose passages which look like the Upanishad passages or the Vedic passages. So people are under the impression that the sophistication of the language, it is a language is like a flowing river. So the rustic aspect of the language should be prior to the more sophisticated aspect of the language. So therefore, the Mahabharata is considered by some people to be older than the Ramayana. So now the point here is that, first of all, traditionally it has been very well known that Ramayana is older and Mahabharata is later. In my answer to the first question, I also mentioned that the influence of the Ramayana is found in the Mahabharata in terms of the short narrative that comes in the Ramopakyana, and also multiple other mentions of the Rama, Sita, etc. within the Mahabharata itself. But another thing also to note is that the current text, which is known as Ramayana, which is available to us, it may be of a slightly later creation of the Mahabharata. That possibility is also there. What could have been the original Ramayana of Valmiki is probably lost to us today. And what we today understand as Valmiki's Ramayana is something which has come down in the oral tradition and documented at a period later than the composition of Mahabharata. So, what I'm trying to say here is that it's a very subtle thing. The story of Ramayana is definitely older than the story of the Mahabharata. But the current texts which we identify as Mahabharata and Ramayana, it is possible that the Mahabharata text is older than the Ramayana text as it is available to us today. But the story itself is older than the Mahabharata. Ramayana story itself is older than the Mahabharata. Yeah. So I think this much is enough to remember, irrespective of which one is older or which one is new, more than the linearity of this construction. See, Indians, we have never believed in the linear aspect of history. We have always considered it to be a cyclical one. And like in the Western tradition, there is no absolute authorship of a work and I am prior and I am later. There is nobody who has claimed that way. All of us think that we are a part of the bigger whole. So, with this bigger philosophical approach, these questions should not even matter, honestly. Whatever has been the sampradayik or paramparika belief, we should go ahead with that, probably. Yeah. Although, looking at the language structures, it may appear differently, but philosophically, the Ramayana is older and Mahabharata is later. It's sufficient to stick on to that, I guess.
Okay, wonderful. I think it's important for all of us to consider the values that each of these epics
Absolutely.
and the Puranas or the Smritis give us, rather than debating on which is older and which is newer. The value is what is very, very important here. Moving on to my next question, I'm very curious to understand the authenticity of Ramayana and Mahabharata. We know that several locations that comes in both these texts still exist today, but are these alone just enough to elaborate on the authenticity? Because we do not have any written evidences, nor do we have archaeological findings for this. So I'm very curious to understand about this. Let us delve deeper into these aspects and more about Ramayana and Mahabharata in our next episode. Thank you so much, Mahodaya, for answering all these questions with so much of in-depth answer. We are very grateful to you. Thank you so much. See you all soon in the next episode.
Namaste.